The dead have no voice, but I'm not dead anymore. 7 years. For 2,555 days, I have been a ghost. A whisper carried on the humid, jasmine-scented air of Savannah, a city that loves its secrets almost as much as its statues. They buried Eleanor Marlowe in a shallow grave of lies, her name a regrettable stain on the pristine white marble of the Marlowe family empire. A tragic, beautiful, broken thing who couldn't bear the weight of her own supposed sins. That's the story they wrote for me, the final chapter in the life of the Golden Child. It was a convenient fiction, a masterpiece of narrative control penned by the two people I should have been able to trust with my soul. My father, William Marlowe, and my younger sister, Charlotte. I remember the night they killed me with a clarity that still burns behind my eyes, a phantom pain that throbs sharper than any surgical scar. It wasn't with a bullet or a blade, but with the cold, calculated precision of a hostile takeover of my very existence. The air in Father's study, a room paneled in dark, unforgiving mahogany that seemed to absorb all light and hope, was thick with the scent of his 20-year-old bourbon and the even older stench of betrayal. I had found it. The truth. Not one truth, but a whole web of them, a cat's cradle of doctored ledgers, laundered funds, and silenced voices that led straight back to the gleaming, patriarchal heart of Marlowe Industries. A whistleblower, a decent man named Arthur Vance with a wife and 2 young daughters, had been systematically ruined, his career obliterated and his reputation shredded, all to protect our family's good name. I was 29, still clinging to the childish notion that blood was thicker than the ink on a fraudulent contract. I laid the files on his antique desk, the paper a stark white against the dark wood. My hands weren't trembling with fear, but with a righteous, electric fury. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of impending war. "He has children, Father," I said, my voice tight, reedy in the cavernous room. "You destroyed a family." William Marlowe looked up from his crystal tumbler, his eyes, the same shade of blue as my own, holding no surprise. Only a deep, weary disappointment, as if I had tracked mud onto his priceless Persian rug. "Eleanor, you're overwrought," he said, his voice that smooth, practiced balm designed to soothe and disarm, a tone he used for spooked horses and hysterical women. He wasn't just a Southern tycoon. He was an artist of genteel manipulation, a maestro of the quiet corruption that festered beneath the city's charming facade. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His power was in his stillness, in the unnerving calm that suggested he had already considered every outcome and chosen the one that best suited him. Charlotte stood by his shoulder, a porcelain doll with shark's eyes. Her ambition, a thing I had once admired as spirit, was a chilling, consuming fire. She, who I had read bedtime stories to, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose teenage heartbreaks I had mended with late-night ice cream and reassurances. I remembered a rainy afternoon when we were children, huddled under a blanket, and she had whispered, "I'm going to be just like Father one day." I had thought it was admiration. I realized now it was a statement of intent. She looked at me not with sisterly concern, but with the cold, clinical appraisal of a rival who had finally found an opportunity to neutralize a threat. "She'll ruin us," Charlotte had said, her voice a clipped, venomous whisper not to me but to him. "Everything we've worked for, everything you've worked for." She made it about him. She always knew how to play him, how to strum the chords of his pride and his paranoia. They didn't have to shout. The betrayal was a quiet, suffocating thing. In the days that followed, they constructed my coffin of lies. A forged suicide note, written in a flawless imitation of my flowing script, a skill Charlotte had always envied and secretly practiced. A carefully orchestrated media campaign painting me as unstable, erratic, broken by a secret drug addiction. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. They erased me while I was still breathing, each whispered rumor, each sympathetic headline another shovelful of dirt on my grave. The actual death was messier. A week later, they coaxed me into a drive, a talk, a chance to fix things. The plea had come from Father, his voice laced with a performance of paternal regret that my foolish heart wanted to believe. On a rain-slicked road outside the city, flanked by ancient oaks weeping Spanish moss, a dark sedan slammed into my car. The world was a kaleidoscope of shattering glass, the scream of tortured metal, and the coppery taste of my own blood. Before I lost consciousness, I saw 2 figures, hired brutes, not my family, they weren't brave enough for that, pull me from the wreckage. The beating was methodical, intended to disfigure, to sell the story of a violent, tragic end. They left me for dead in a muddy ditch, my face a bloody ruin, the rain washing away my tears and my identity. But they made one mistake, a crucial, fatal miscalculation. They forgot about Jasper. Old, loyal Jasper, whose family had served the Marlowes for generations and whose own son, a good kid with a bad habit, I had quietly paid to get into a top-tier rehab program father had callously refused to fund. Not our problem, William had declared, but it was my problem. I had made it mine. Jasper, plagued by a nagging worry in his gut after witnessing the tension in the house, had followed us that night. He found me, a broken doll in the mud. He pulled my battered body from the wreckage, his face a mask of horror and fury. Under the cover of darkness, with a risk to himself and his family I can never repay, he smuggled me away from the city that had become my tomb. The first year was a living hell. A blur of disorienting pain, surgeries in sterile, off-the-books clinics in countries I couldn't name, and nightmares that left me drenched in sweat, screaming into a pillow so Jasper's landlord wouldn't hear. Jasper was my anchor, his quiet, steady presence the only thing tethering me to the world. He fed me, cleaned my wounds, and held my hand while I wept for the woman I had been. The first time I saw my new face in the mirror, I didn't recognize the stranger staring back. The high cheekbones were still there, but subtly altered. The nose was different, sharper. The scars around my hairline were a permanent, pale roadmap of my betrayal. It was in that moment, looking into those haunted, unfamiliar eyes, that Eleanor Marlowe truly died. The grief was a physical weight, a stone in my chest. I shattered the mirror with a scream that tore from my throat, a raw, animal sound of loss. But as I stared at the fractured reflections, at the 1,000 broken pieces of the woman I was, something else began to grow in the ruins. A cold, hard seed of rage. I would not just survive, I would prevail. For the next 6 years, I was in a furnace of my own making. The soft, idealistic woman was burned away, leaving behind something harder, sharper, more resilient. I devoured books on corporate finance and contract law with a feral hunger. I spent hours in dingy, sweat-soaked gyms, learning Krav Maga, molding my body into a weapon. Every punch I threw at the heavy bag was a blow against my father's arrogant sneer. Every submission hold I mastered was for Charlotte's smug condescension. I drained my trust fund, the one they couldn't touch, a relic of my maternal grandmother's foresight, and learned to move money through untraceable accounts. I chose the name Amelia Vance, a constant, burning reminder of the man they destroyed, my own personal battle flag. Now I have returned to Savannah. The city feels different through these eyes. The Spanish moss hanging from the ancient oaks no longer looks romantic. It looks like a shroud. The charming, gaslit alleyways feel like traps. As Amelia Vance, corporate consultant, I am an entirely new creation. My hair is a severe, dark brunette bob that swings with predatory purpose when I walk. My eyes, once bright with a fool's idealism, now hold the cold, flat glint of a predator. The upcoming merger between Marlowe Industries and a foreign conglomerate, the crowning achievement of Charlotte's career, is my Trojan horse. I designed my entire professional persona, my resume, my very being, to be the one person they would need to hire to ensure it went smoothly. My first week is an exercise in icy control. I walk into the lion's den, the gleaming, sterile headquarters of Marlowe Industries, and the air crackles with a history only I can feel. The scent of my father's brand of coffee still hangs in the air. The hushed, deferential tones of the employees are a familiar symphony. In my first major meeting, I expertly dissect a critical flaw in the merger's liability structuring, a detail their high-priced lawyers had missed entirely. I watch the color drain from Charlotte's face as the foreign representatives murmur their approval of my findings. She is forced to concede my expertise, her jaw tight. I earn her grudging respect, laced with the bitter poison of resentment. It's a start. "Ms. Vance," she says to me later, cornering me by the elevators. Her voice is polished and imperious, the same tone she used on stable hands and housekeepers. "We expect efficiency and, above all, discretion." "Discretion is my specialty, Ms. Marlowe," I reply, my voice even, my gaze unwavering. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. I meet her eyes and hold them a second longer than necessary, a small act of dominance she isn't used to. I see a flicker of confusion, a brief crack in her composure before it's sealed away. My first move is a surgical strike against my sister. I know her arrogance, her belief that she is untouchable. Using an encrypted network and a burner phone, I meet with a hungry local journalist I've been cultivating for months. His name is Ben Carter, and he has a chip on his shoulder the size of Forsyth Park. I don't give him everything, just a taste. Emails showing Charlotte pressuring an environmental agency to ignore violations at one of our manufacturing plants. Memos detailing a plan for mass layoffs post-merger, directly contradicting her public statements. The first article is a small bomb, but it detonates perfectly. I watch from my new office, which ironically has a perfect view of the Marlowe family plot in Bonaventure Cemetery, as a powerful board member. A man I know to be a stickler for public image pulls Charlotte aside, his face grim. Later, I hear her shouting at her loyal assistant, her voice echoing down the hall, accusing her of the leak. The paranoia is setting in. The first crack in her perfect porcelain facade appears. She fires the girl on the spot, a brutal public display that serves only to make her look weak and panicked. For my father, the torment must be more personal. His guilt is his weakness. He is haunted not by what he did, but by the ghost he created. I begin with whispers. I bribe a young IT tech to rig the intercom system. Late at night, when he's alone in his study, the static will crackle and a whisper, my voice digitally aged and distorted, will breathe a single word. Why? Then I arrange for a single, perfect gardenia, my favorite flower, to be delivered to his desk with no card. But the masterstroke is more subtle. I learn from a disgruntled former housekeeper that he still maintains my mother's private sitting room as a shrine, untouched since her death a decade ago. It was our sanctuary, a place of light and laughter that stood in stark contrast to the gloom of his study. I bribe a new cleaning staff member to spray a light mist of my mother's favorite, long-discontinued perfume, Fracas, in the room. On a hidden camera I had Jasper's contact install, I watch him enter the room. He stops. He sniffs the air. His shoulders, once so broad and unbowed, begin to shake. He slowly crumbles, falling into her armchair, his face in his hands. His descent into the waiting arms of his Bourbon collection accelerates. He starts seeing me in the faces of strangers, his paranoia a symphony composed just for me. Then, Henry, freeing him is my reclamation, an act of love in a war of hate. My brother, my twin, my other half. They had called his breakdown a consequence of my suicide. A schizophrenic episode brought on by grief. Convenient. He knew something was wrong, he'd questioned the narrative, so they silenced him with diagnoses and drugs, locking him away in a private, high-end sanitarium that was more prison than hospital. Using forged credentials from a sympathetic Dr. Jasper found, and a hefty bribe, I orchestrate his release into my care, citing new, experimental treatments for his condition, available only under my supervision in a private setting. Our reunion is a fragile, heartbreaking thing. He is a shadow of the boy I remember, his vibrant spirit dimmed by a cocktail of medications and 7 years of institutional despair. He shuffles into the sterile meeting room, his eyes vacant. I sit opposite him, my heart aching. I don't speak. I simply unclasp the locket from around my neck, the one he gave me for our 16th birthday, and slide it across the table. It's a simple silver oval, dented from the car crash. He stares at it, his hand trembling as he reaches for it. He fumbles with the clasp, his medicated fingers clumsy. When it springs open, revealing our smiling teenage faces, a flicker of recognition sparks in his eyes. Ellie, he whispers, the name a ghost on his lips. The dam of his medicated calm breaks. He collapses into my arms, his body racked with sobs of a grief 7 years deep. He clings to me, the lost boy I remember, and for the first time in years, I allow myself to cry with him. The first few weeks are a delicate dance. We take long, silent walks through Forsyth Park, the sunlight dappling through the canopy of oaks. One afternoon, a distant siren wails, and I see him flinch, his breath catching, his eyes wide with a familiar terror. He's back in that white room. I stop, take his hand, and ground him. I'm here, Henry, you're safe, they can't hurt you anymore. I'm not just freeing him from his prison, I am rebuilding him piece by piece, and he in turn rebuilds me. His quiet strength returns. His memory, sharp and clear once the fog of the drugs begins to lift, becomes my greatest asset. He recalls the location of a hidden safe behind a false panel in Father's study, a place our grandfather built, a place only the family knew. Grandfather always said Father's real business was secrets, Henry murmurs one evening. Together, we are a perfect, vengeful machine. Our work draws unforeseen attention. Detective Rosa Quinn, a sharp, weary-eyed woman who transferred to Savannah from the Miami-Dade homicide unit to escape her own ghosts. She doesn't buy the neat narratives the city's elite tell themselves. An anonymous tip from me, via Ben Carter, leads her to reopen my cold case. She starts connecting the dots on a corkboard in her cramped office. The corporate sabotage at Marlowe Industries, William's public unraveling, the sudden release of his son, and the arrival of a mysterious, hyper-competent consultant named Amelia Vance. She decides to pay Ms. Vance a visit. The conversation is a masterclass in deflection. She is sharp, her questions like expertly thrown darts. It's a strange coincidence, you arriving just as everything starts to fall apart for the Marlowes, she says, her gaze penetrating as she stirs a packet of sugar into her coffee. Crisis is opportunity, detective, I reply smoothly, my own cup untouched. That's the first rule of consulting. I hold her gaze, a silent battle of wills over the lukewarm coffee in my minimalist office. She leaves with nothing concrete, but I know I am on her radar. The clock is ticking faster now. The game has a new, unpredictable player. The air in the Marlowe boardroom is thick enough to shatter. The merger, once a symbol of their impending triumph, now hangs by a single, frayed thread. My calculated leaks have made the foreign partners skittish. They've demanded a full, independent audit to be led by me, the only one they trust to be impartial. My father, his face a ruin of sleepless nights and cheap bourbon, glares at Charlotte with open suspicion. She returns his gaze with a mixture of raw fear and seething resentment. The vipers are finally turning on each other. The time for whispers and shadows is over. It's time for the final act. I call a family meeting, just the four of us, in the same mahogany-paneled study where my life was stolen. Father, Charlotte, Henry, and the ghost they thought they had buried. I walk into the room, my heels clicking like a metronome counting down their final seconds. My eyes are all Eleanor. A pleasure to finally have the infamous Marlowe family all in one room. I begin, my voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand. I watch their faces. Charlotte's is a mask of confusion and irritation. What is the meaning of this, Vance? And what is he doing here? She snaps, gesturing to Henry, who stands silently by my side, no longer stooped but tall and firm. Father's face is bleary, lost in his alcoholic fog. I let my gaze settle on him. You look tired, Father, I say, the word, Father, a deliberate twist of the knife. He flinches. You remember that summer we spent at the lake house? The one where Henry fell out of the oak tree and I told you he'd learn to fly. He stares, his brow furrowed. His mind struggles to pierce the haze of liquor and guilt. And that's when he sees it. Something in my eyes, in the memory only I could know, the ghost behind the mask. Eleanor, he whispers, the single word a puff of disbelief, his face draining of all color. Charlotte stiffens, her head snapping towards me. Her eyes widen, and for a glorious second I see pure, unadulterated terror. No, it can't be. When you bury someone alive, you should always make sure they can't claw their way out, I say, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You don't get to say my name. You lost that right the day you chose a lie over your own daughter. Charlotte, ever the fighter, recovers first. Rage eclipses her fear. You bitch, she hisses, her polished veneer cracking to reveal the ugliness beneath. She lunges for me, her carefully constructed composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. But Henry is there. My brother, no longer the broken boy from the sanitarium, but a man forged in the same fire that tempered me. He moves with a speed that surprises them both, intercepting her, his grip on her arm like iron. It's over, Charlotte, he says, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable finality. And then the checkmate. I lay it all out for them, savoring each word as I pace before the cold fireplace. The company, I begin, a cruel smile playing on my lips. The jewel in your tarnished crown is no longer yours. I pause, letting the words hang in the suffocating air. Using the original, unaltered incorporation documents Henry retrieved from the hidden safe, documents that predated father's treacherous amendments. I had exploited a loophole in the merger agreement with my authority as lead auditor. I have signed controlling interest over to a new consortium. It's led by none other than the children of Arthur Vance. His name will be cleared, his family compensated with the very empire that crushed him. Charlotte's face contorts in a mask of disbelief and fury, but I am not finished. And the financial crimes, I continue, my voice like ice. The doctored ledgers I found all those years ago, along with a mountain of new evidence I've gathered detailing 7 years of fraud, bribery, and witness intimidation. That has been delivered in a neat, undeniable package to Detective Quinn and the federal investigators she has so eagerly brought into the fold. They should be arriving any minute. William Marlowe, the great Southern tycoon, crumbles. He falls to his knees, a pathetic, broken old man in a bespoke suit. He begs, he pleads, he speaks of protecting the family, the legacy, his words slurring together. Family doesn't protect itself with knives in the back, I tell him, my words the final, fatal blow. You didn't protect a legacy, you protected a lie. In the ensuing chaos, as the first sirens wail in the distance, a sound that is music to my ears, my father, in a fit of drunken rage and despair, hurls his bourbon glass against the wall. It shatters against a lamp, and a flicker of flame licks up the antique brocade curtains. A self-inflicted inferno for a self-made monster. Charlotte's shriek of rage is the last thing I hear as Henry pulls me from the room, his hand firm in mine. The last thing I see of the Marlowe estate is flames against the night sky, a fitting pyre for a dynasty built on lies. The Spanish moss on the ancient oaks is illuminated by the blaze, a fiery baptism for a new beginning. Henry sits beside me in the car Jasper has waiting, his hand steady in mine as we drive away. We don't look back. We are no longer the broken children of a fallen house. We are survivors. The road ahead is long and uncertain, a blank page waiting to be written. The ghost of Eleanor Marlowe is finally at peace, her story told, her name avenged. In her place sits a woman of steel, a woman who has learned that sometimes the only justice that matters is the justice you are willing to seize for yourself. The cavern where revenge lived inside me for 7 years is now quiet, vast, and empty. It is not triumph I feel, not entirely. It is a profound, aching stillness. The end of a war, the silence after the storm. Sometimes, I say, my voice clear and strong against the distant crackle of the flames, to truly bury the past, you have to burn the whole bloodline to ash. We drive on, down a long Georgian road, the flames of our past lighting the way to a future we will finally write for ourselves. The dead may have no voice, but I am alive, and I have spoken my truth.